All right, well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Yeah, we're going to start off our look at Sapphire 2020 with a look at our new effect, which is called S LensFlare. And what S LensFlare does is it sort of simulates the camera technique, the physical camera technique of, not lens flare, goodness me, free lens. Lens flare comes later. We're going to look at free lens first. And free lens is all about the technique of freelensing or lens whacking. And what this actually is where you take the lens off of the camera and you start wiggling it around a little bit. And it looks in real life something a little bit like this. So this is me with a camera moving it around, or actually just moving the lens around. And there's a few little different characteristics that this gives us. So the first one is we get these sort of big sort of lens flares or light leaks coming in at the edges, which we can see here. The other one we've got is a bit of lens distortion. And we also have a sort of a macro sort of style where what happens is we get a very, very thin area that's in focus. And so we can sort of choose where that area is depending on how we tilt the lens. Now, physical lens whacking or free lensing is not without its risks because you actually have to physically take the lens off of the camera and start moving it around. That becomes a little bit sort of tricky or maybe even a little bit dangerous depending on where you are, because of course stuff starts to get in to the sensor or between the lens and the sensor. And in this case here, this shot was actually filmed on a red camera with a rather expensive lens. And if you thought I wasn't sweating every second that lens was off and floating around, then you're wrong. But it does give like a really nice effect. And that's one of the reasons why we now have this new free lens effect, because we like the effect, we just don't like the danger of doing it, or the fact that, you know, when you're doing it live, you have some control over it, but oftentimes you'll only get one chance to actually get your shot. So with a free lens filter, you actually have a chance of art directing this type of effect. So we can take our footage, which was just sort of, you know, regular kind of travelogue type stuff, and actually get a sort of kind of more natural, interesting look to it. And it doesn't even have to be, you know, regular footage. It can also be motion graphics, as we're going to see later on in this webinar. So let's actually take a look at our first shot and see what the free lens effect looks like. Okay, so I'm going to come up to my effects and I'm going to come all the way down to Sapphire, Blur and Sharpen, and there we are, S free lens. And you can see as soon as I put this on, something happens, and we get a nice bit of GUI on here, so we can make changes to our lens. So we can either twist it around, or we can come up here and twist it around in a different way. But before we get too far into this, because things are going to start getting a little bit sort of strange in a second, let's just undo that. I want to take a look at actually what's happening with the S lens, so the S free lens effect. So this filter is actually built up of different modules. So the main one that we have is the lens manipulation. So this is simulating what you're actually doing to the physical lens. So we can tilt it in the X and Y. There we go. We can change the distance that it is from the camera body. And if I zoom this backwards, we can get some slightly less realistic, but kind of cool effects anyway. The reason we've got black bars here isn't because of the filter, it's actually because the footage itself is letterboxed. Just going to say that while I remember. And we also have, different ways of treating perspective. But apart from the lens manipulation, that controls these other areas here. So the effect is built up of modules, which we can turn on and off at will. So we have the distortion module, which if I turn that off, you can see just maybe a very small thing here. So the distortion, actually let's change this back up there. The distortion actually simulates what's happening with different types of lenses. So some of the thicker glass, as you start to bend it and twist it around, the light is doing some weird fandango type of dance as it goes in. So that's sort of simulating that. We have the light leaks that we talked about earlier, and we can change all the stuff around about the light leaks, including intensity, either positive, that's very strong light leak, or negative here. Or I can just turn all of the light leaks off for the time being as well, so we can focus on other stuff. We also have shake and vignette, so we can use this to animate up the effect without having any keyframes, which is always a good one in my book. What I want to focus on first, though, is actually the defocus. So what the defocus lets us do is it lets us choose that little macro element, or that what happens when we twist the lens around. We look back here, probably see that quite well on this one, or actually here as well, where we get just a sliver of the image in focus. And that's exactly what we've got with the defocus here. So we can choose how in focus or out of focus the rest of the image is. And like all of the modules, this is connected to the lens manipulation. So if I have the lens sort of just set at 0, just everything reset again, this is pretty much how the original image looked, maybe with a little bit of distortion there. But as soon as I start to tilt this up, we get a much more pronounced effect. So I'm just going to tilt that in the X to start with, and maybe tilt a little bit in the Y. So now we can see we've got a very thin area that's actually in focus. But what if that doesn't coincide with the area that I want to be in focus? Well, we can easily change that. We have this focal point offset, and I can just click that around, and I can choose where on my image I want to stay in focus. And we can keyframe this all up. But as we will find out over the course of this, the next hour, I'm not a huge fan of using keyframes where we can avoid them. So another thing that's new in Sapphire 2020 is being able to use Mocha to do feature tracking. And there's actually quite a few of the filters that we can do this in. We're actually going to look at a few of these as we go through. And if you haven't used Mocha before, what Mocha is a feature, not a feature tracker, it is a planar tracker, completely different to a feature tracker. Meaning that we don't have to just choose one small dot to try to track. We can track this whole plane, this whole texture that's here. And we have two elements by default. We have the shape that we want to track, and we have this focal point offset. So this is the data point where we're going to put this after we bring this back into After Effects. And I can just come over here. I didn't start on the first frame. That's very clever of me. I can just come over here and just track this forwards now, choosing just to track in the translation, scale, and rotation. And you'll see that one of the huge advantages of using Mocha for doing this is that it is very resilient to things like motion blur, noise, and it's actually pretty fast as well. So we're done there. And you can see now that our focal point offset is actually moving along with our shape. So all I have to do is move this into the right place, which is probably going to be around about here. And we know that that is going to stick in with my stalk for the rest of the effect. So all I have to do is save my project, exit out of Mocha, and then tell S Lens that the focal point uses Mocha. And now, if I do a quick RAM preview on this, you'll see that no matter what happens, this area around the stalk is going to stay in focus because I've connected my focal point offset with a quick Mocha track. And this is really cool. And we can start to bring in, lots and lots of different elements here as well. I've even got quite a few presets that I can start to work with as well. So we've got, lots of different ones already in here. I'm not going to spend too much time in the preset browser for Freelens because we're going to look at this in much more detail shortly. If I come to my next shot though, there's one other thing that Mocha can do, and that's especially useful with S Lens, where we can start to create some quite kind of big effects. I'm just going to click one button to bypass Mocha here a second, and let's have a little look at what's going on here. So if I come in and bring up my leak intensity, my light leak intensity, quite a bit there, you can see that with my effect, which is working, pretty much how I want it to. And the only bad thing about it is that we're covering our main subject's face right at the beginning. I mean, to be fair, it's not too extreme at the moment, but there are examples or there are cases where you might want to turn this up a little bit, and then it does get a little bit more extreme. So what I can do with Mocha here, if I come into Edit Mocha, again, directly on the S Lens effect, is I can use Mocha not just to create a focal point offset, but also to do masking as well. And I've just drawn in a very quick shape around her face and just tracked it in exactly the same way as we tracked in the stalk in the last example. And I'll just save that out, exit. And now I can click on bypass Mocha or turn off bypass Mocha, which had one before, and that's going to apply that mask to my effect. And obviously it's inverted. There's my mask. So it's actually the opposite of where I want it to be. So if I click on invert Mocha, that swaps it all around, and I still have the ability to come in and blur or feather this shape out so we can get this sort of fitting in a little bit more. So if I come in, maybe just take the light intensity leak down a little bit more. There we go. And I'll do a quick RAM preview of that. Let's try it again, do a quick RAM preview of that. And you can see that now we've got all of the fun stuff of the Freelens, but because we've masked out her face, we're never in any doubt that she's the main subject that we're working on. So it's quite a sort of subtle thing, but it's actually a very important thing that I think to be able to do within this effect. And I would say that Freelens is probably one of my new favorite effects. I'm using it on pretty much everything. That isn't just real footage. It's also to add a little bit of extra puff or pang to a bit of motion graphics as well. So if I come in here, let's load in a preset. Let's have a little look at what we've got. Maybe something like this, slow and smooth and not, that'll do. You can see that that's just giving me a little extra something, and I can even come in here, maybe change up the colors that I'm using in the light leak to something a little bit more pleasing. There we go. So we can add this on top of already rendered out motion graphics to give a slightly different effect to it as well. And what I'm getting is a nice sort of organic amount of animation, because we also have this shake module. And the shake lets us choose different ways of animating this up or shaking this up. So we have normal, twitchy, and jumpy. And we can decide which of the modules or which of the parameters actually get any of the shake at all. So we've got things like tilt, X and Y randomness and frequency. We have, main overall amplitude and frequency as well. So we can set up all of our different modules to have exactly the right sort of shake and wobble that we want, and then keyframe the master amplitude and frequency to kind of just dial that back in to where we want it to be. So you can see that just by adding in S3 lens and one of the presets, we've got actually quite a nice, interesting little effect that's taken our motion graphics from something that looked kind of all right, kind of a bit fun, into something a little bit more interesting. So I am a huge, huge fan of S3 lens, and it certainly is a lot easier than me taking my camera and taking the lens off and then dropping it, which I'm not a big fan of, surprisingly enough. Cool, we're going to move away from free lens now for a moment, but if you do have any questions, keep putting them into chat, and if Brian can answer them straight away, then we will come back to it at the end of the webinar. I'm going to move over into LensFlare now. And LensFlare is another one of the effects that is near and dear to my heart. I think that anyone who doesn't like a good lens flare is literally the Grinch. I may not know what literally or Grinch means, but let's have a little look at some of the new stuff we can do with the lens flare in Sapphire 2020. So over the last year, there have actually been some big changes or big developments going on with the Sapphire lens flare, not least, if we come into the flare designer, not least the sheer volume and quality of the flare presets. So I talked a little bit about this in a previous webinar, which was quite a while ago now. So we have some of the sort of presets that are designed probably more for motion graphic work. We sort of move those around like that. Or we have other ones that are based off of real life lenses. So we have one that is, based off the Cour anamorphic eye, what's the word? Is it SF special flare? Is that the one? I believe that to be the case. And the new version of Sapphire also has some new flare presets as well. So again, some of these are based off of real lenses. So we have the Canon Samir, which is a really nice, actually it's a really nice lens. I quite like that one. Or we are going to a slightly different style. We have a Jupiter 985, which is a lens that I picked up off of eBay for about $100. So if you can afford $100, you can probably get a lens that, or a flare that looks a bit like that. Or we have the Cour Evolution 40mm, which is a lens that is it's nicely in the five-figure dollar range. I think it's I believe this one's $20,000. If you don't have $20,000 to shoot with the Cour Evolution and you want that style of flare, there it is. But we also have actually some kind of very different styles of flares in this one. So there's stuff like the Spellcraft, which I'm a big fan of. There's It Fell from the Sky, which is just a mad lens flare, and I love it. But I think one of my favorites of the new ones is They Came at Night. So this is like proper big old-fashioned sci-fi lens flare. This is this is the one where you're really kind of putting down your marker and saying, like, this is the type of style that I'm going for. It's a big, bold, brash flare. And I should say that even though we're using these as presets, we still have full control over all the elements. So we can open up these groups and take a quick look at what these are all doing, and sort of turn those individually on and off, or come in and sort of change the parameters on a group level. So if I wanted to change the color or the tint on the hotspot, for example, I can do that right there and then, very, very simply. In this case, I'm just going to keep it as it is, because I kind of like it the way it is. The eagle-eyed of you will have a little look down in here and just go, oh, this looks like a little interesting thing. This is color management. I'm not going to talk about this yet, because Brian is going to talk about this at the end of the webinar, or towards the end of the webinar, I should say. What I'm going to do is just hit OK. And we get our big, brash lens flare back in After Effects. Look at that. So that's looking kind of cool. Now, one of the things that I've seen people do, or actually some things that people don't do when working with the Sapphire lens flare, is actually take advantage of one of the big things that we have, which is the edge and center triggers. So this is something that some people overlook simply because they default to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tap these up a little bit to 0.2 on both the edge width and the center radius. And now we can see that as we move towards the edge and the center, we get a bit of a self-animating lens flare. So it reacts more to the edges of the image here, which is really, really useful thing. So coming in and adding in the triggers is a really nice way of giving it a bit more life and a bit more sort of organic look to our particular flare here. And it's another thing of what I was talking about earlier, of sort of animating without using keyframes, which I'm a very big fan of. What I am going to do though is I'm going to come in and take my scale widths down just a bit. I say just a bit, I mean a lot. I'm going to start my scale widths down to 100. I mean, I like it big and brash, but I think we can pull back and make ourselves just a little bit more subtle right this moment. And take a look here. Over just underneath the edit lens, we have edit Mocha again. And guess what? Yep, that means we can do our tracking again within Mocha. And unlike in Freelens, where we only have the one effect tracker, we actually have two within LensFlare. We have a separate tracker for the hotspot and one for the pivot. I actually don't really care about the pivot point in this particular shot. I'm happy for it to just be in the center. So I'm going to turn that off and turn the processing off on that. What I am interested in is the hotspot itself. So we have this nice headlight that we're going to track in. And I could just go in and track the headlight in as it is there. But this can be a little bit risky. In this case, the actual headlight flare that we're getting, the sort of natural flare that we're getting, is pretty static. It doesn't sort of go off too much or flicker off too much. But you can find, actually more often than not, these things will kind of flash up and flick on and off and change brightness on you, and that can, be a bit tricky to track. So one of the other advantages of Mocha being a planar tracker is that we don't have to track the area that we want to apply our data to. All we have to do is come in and apply it to a coplanar area. So this could be the sign up at the top here, or it could be the front of the bus right here, which is probably what we're going to do. And again, I'll just track in the translation, scale, and rotation. I could track in skew and perspective if I wanted to, but I don't think that's going to be necessary here. And one of the things to look for, if I turn my grid on, is just to make sure that this is, the track is working properly. Is we want to make sure that this stays steady. We don't want this flickering around or moving around in sort of unexpected ways. We just want this to be a nice, steady move in. And the grid itself is always going to be bigger than just the hotspot. So it's a lot easier to kind of determine if we've got good tracking data based off of the grid rather than based off the hotspot. So that's cool. Happy with that. That's nice and easy. I'm going to save and exit. And again, all I have to do is come over and say hotspot uses Mocha, click on that, and that moves that into place. There we go. In this case, I am going to add a keyframe at the start and at the end, just to kind of simulate the growing of the flare there. I think that's looking all right. 100 to 150, yeah, that seems to be fairly reasonable. Cool, but guess what? This bus has more than one headlight. It actually has two, surprisingly enough. And to create another flare for this that actually tracks in at the same way is really, really easy. All I'm going to do is duplicate my flare up, come back into Mocha on this new flare, and if you have a look down the bottom, our timeline is still blue, so it means we've still got this track data in there. So all I have to do is move my hotspot over to the other side. Because that's coplanar, when I come over here, I now have both of the headlights tracked in without any hassle whatsoever. So just that one single track is good enough to actually track in both of those headlights. If we play that back, that's looking rather nice. And if I turn on my curves at the end, we get a sort of much more dark and mysterious sci-fi London night where all of London has been taken over, was about to be taken over by an alien horde. Probably very close to the truth. There we go. Right, so we've certainly put our mark on that one there. So that's the before and the after. Before and after. Cool, and we're going to move away from LensFlare now. So remember, keep your questions coming, and we'll get to them in just a little while. What I'm going to move on to now is another new feature that's coming in with Sapphire 2020, and again, it's another little Mocha feature, and this is a really useful one for doing this sort of work, so or dealing with this sort of shot. So what I want to do with this one, so we take a look at our girl, and we can see we've got some very big reflections going on in her sunglasses. I want to kind of bring those reflections down a little bit, but I don't want to go through all the hassle of actually painting stuff out. All I'm going to do is do a bit of a color correction on them. And I'm going to do a color correction using my Sapphire Gamma. And, the Gamma is just, yeah, it's a quick Gamma correction. And we have scale lights and offset darks, which we will play with in all due course. So first thing I'm going to do is come into Mocha. So we take a look again here and look at the sunglasses themselves. This can actually be a surprisingly difficult thing to track if you choose the wrong area to track in, of course. So it's something where it's quite difficult for point trackers to get a good grip on things, because as she turns her head, we lose some of the edges of what's happening over over on the right hand side here. And we also have a reflective area, which is a bit of a pain to track as well. And if we just try to do a regular track just on the whole sunglasses, then we're going to be taking in all those reflections, and the way that those move is not coplanar to the way the rest of the sunglasses move. So the way that I'd normally do this would be to come in and draw up a nice big shape, maybe with a few different shapes, to try and cut out the lenses in there so that Mocha has something to track, but not anything reflective to track. I can do things a little bit simpler now, using a new feature that we have in the Sapphire Mocha, which is called the area brush. And if I show you the area brush, I'm going to just take my radius down a little bit. The area brush we can treat just like a regular sort of Photoshop paintbrush. So I can come in and I can just draw in the areas that I want to choose without actually making any splines at all. And if I go too far, I can just hold down the Alt key and just come in and take out some of the bits that I don't want anymore. So I could maybe just even take in that one little area there. And then as soon as I turn off my quick mask, Mocha will draw up a spline or series of splines that actually fit the shape that I've just drawn. So I can call this one glasses track. There we go. And I will come in, and in this case, I will actually track in the perspective here to deal with that perspective movement as she turns her head. And I'll just track that forwards. And this actually has proven very, very popular with people who either haven't really used Mocha before, or are a bit scared of actually going in and drawing up splines, or they don't want to actually have the hassle of drawing up splines. And even as a big fan of splines myself, I've found myself using the area brush a lot more than I thought I would when I first saw it. And this is great. So now I've got my track, which is working nicely. I can tell it's working nicely, of course, because of the grid. There we go. Look at that. Perfect. Steady. Looking great. So I'm going to turn that off, and now I'm going to come to the more fun work of actually drawing in a spline here. I could use the area brush, but because I am now very aware of what the time is, I'm just going to quickly draw up a quick shape for us here. Just going to hold down the right mouse button or the equivalent on the Wacom pen and just make all of those edges nice and smooth. So that is my lens. What side is that? Lens left. That will do. And I'll come over and do the same thing on the right hand side as well. I could actually do this on the same layer. I can create multiple shapes on the same layer if I want to, but I think it's absolutely fine to be doing this on two separate layers in this particular case. There we go. And again, just move that a little bit into place there. That could be a little bit looser. There we go. So we can bring that in there. Cool. Okay, and that would be lens right, the process of elimination. Okay, so what I'm going to do is come down to my linked track and link both of my lenses to my main glasses track. So when I come in, let's give these a different color so we can see what these are doing. So if we move that around, that should end up in relatively the right amount, the right place. If it doesn't, I can just very quickly transform the whole shape up. I'll just add in a single keyframe there, and that should be, yeah, that's looking pretty good. And we'll do the same over here. Come to the end. That's almost perfect. And just, I'm holding down Control here so that I can just distort that shape into place. There we go. And that's looking pretty good. Oh, now the only thing that I've noticed here is that obviously we have the nose that's going over the top of one of our lenses. We don't want that. That's a bad thing. So I'm going to use another one of the tools that we have, which is the magnetic edge tool. And I can just come in here, and that's going to create a shape up that follows the edges. So it's a nice way of very simply coming in and drawing up a shape that sort of follows the edges up there. I'll just smooth that down a little bit, and I'll call that one nose. And I'll just track that quickly in. There we go. I don't need this to be 100% this particular case. All I need it to do is just cut out the lenses over on this side, which it looks like it's doing. So I'm going to come to the nose layer properties and just hit subtract on that. So now I'm happy. I've got my three shapes. I'm going to exit out. And let's take a look now when I start adjusting the gamma. Ooh, yeah. Now it's only using the area that we've created in the Mocha mask to change up the gamma there. And as before, I can just sort of smooth that out. I can come in, maybe scale the lights down a little bit, not too much. Maybe bring the gamma back up a little bit. There we go. And just as we did before, I can duplicate up my effect. Let's reset the things that I changed and come into my Mocha and invert that. And then I can just be adjusting everything apart from the sunglasses. Maybe just creating something a little bit like that there. There we go. So we've got before and after. There we go. Before and after. Cool. And that's another quick thing that we can do directly within not just S Gamma, but basically any of the Sapphire filters that can use Mocha and Mocha masks. I'm moving on now to something that's very quick. And it's lucky it's very quick because we are definitely running short on time. And this is the fact that there have been some huge performance tweaks in some of the Sapphire effects for Sapphire 2020. So if you've been using things like blur motion or rays or edge rays, you're going to be in for an absolute treat here. I'm going to apply, what shall I come in and apply? Let's come into lighting and apply streaks maybe. And we can, let's turn up the streaks brightness. There we go. So we can see what the streaks are doing. In fact, what I'll do with the streaks is just load up a preset. I think that's probably even easier. Is come into the preset browser and wait for the preset browser to wake up. There we go. And let's choose a preset. Let's choose actually lights from beyond. That's going to look pretty good. So we've got some rays coming now from above. And if I play that back, we're getting, you know, pretty good playback. It's about sort of, there we go, that's a bit better. It's now playing back real time, catching up. So what we've got is, for people who like looking at stats, I'll show you this. We've actually got some playback in After Effects on Mac OS and in Windows that is, you know, looking at maybe 2.5 times faster or even up to 3 times faster than we were getting in Sapphire 2019.5. So this is a huge thing. And I would actually recommend, so I'm going to put that back. I'd actually recommend, if you're a big fan of numbers, to have a look at borisfx.com/support/Sapphire-2020-benchmarks, or just go to the homepage, look at Sapphire, and it's very prominently in there as well. So if I take a look at actually one of the other ones I've got here, so something like rays, maybe, not edge rays, just regular rays, and I'll play that back. Something is, because of the webinar webcasting, I'm getting slower playback than I normally would, because this usually plays back in real time on my machine. And with the edge rays, we've also got, surprise, surprise, Mocha coming in to power the center of those rays. And I hear what you're screaming out there. You're saying, but Ben, I can't see where the center point is. All I see is the search area. So yes, there it is. It's outside of the screen. There it is. It's definitely in there. Cool. And Rays has that, and Edge Rays has that. A big fan of Edge Rays to add in a bit of atmosphere into a scene like this. Not least because we can control the atmosphere. If you haven't been working with the atmosphere in Edge Rays or in LensFlare or anywhere else actually where it's included, I would very wholeheartedly suggest you have a little play with that, because it's one of those little subtle things that add some animation into your effect without you having to do any real work. There's no keyframing involved. You just set it up, and you let it play back, and you get this cool sort of smoky sort of misty feeling that really sort of brings up a whole lot of life into your effect without you having to do anything. And any time where I can get something that looks really cool without me actually having to do anything proper, any sort of hard work, I'm very up for that. So Sapphire performance, it's good. In fact, it's really good, especially when you don't have webinar recording stuff going on at the same time. The final thing that I'm going to talk about before I hand over to Brian is going to be a very quick thing, and it's actually just one of the sort of changes that we have when looking at presets. So something that's changed up in the preset browser. If you haven't used Sapphire for a while, you're going to be very happy to see that you can play back in the preset browser. You're also going to be happy to see that you can compare stuff in the preset browser as well. So we have the original on the left-hand side and what we're working on the right-hand side. This is actually very useful for kind of just finding the type of effect that you actually want. If you don't want to compare side by side, you also have a compare split, and you can choose where that split is. And in fact, I can choose where that split is while it's playing back as well. So this is just like the first time it plays back, it can be a little bit slow as it's just caching in your original clip. But then, once it's been through once, everything else sort of is nice and fast again. And we can change how that works as well. So if you don't want to play back on the sort of moving image, you can render on a still image as well instead. We'll turn our compare off. So it's just rendering that back on a still frame now. But I think it's much more fun to play back on the original. Cool. And there's the same things we had previously, like preview on black, preview on source, preview on sample, which can also help to to sort of speed things up if you're running a slightly slower machine. So preset browser, new stuff, kind of cool. Performance issues on 7 new effects, or 7 different effects: edge rays, streaks, rays, blur motion, I forget the other 2, dissolve edge rays, dissolve rays, there we go. The huge amount of improvements to the integration of Mocha within Sapphire, including the parameter tracking, and the fact that we now have the area brush and the magnetic tool built directly into our effects, which is always very nice. Plus the new improvements to LensFlare with the new presets, and definitely my favorite new effect of the year is free lens, where we're coming in and getting a lot of very cool looks for a very low price of sticking on the free lens effect, twiddling with a few little parameters, and letting the whole thing just auto animate. I'm a huge fan of free lens. I love it. But there's one more thing. That's one thing that I'm not going to talk about. I'm going to let Brian talk about instead. So I'm going to change the presenter and hand over to Brian now, and he's going to be talking about color management.
Thank you, Ben.
You are very welcome. And there you
Great
are.
presentation as always. Can you see my screen?
Yes, indeed.
Cool. Thank you, Ben, for the cool look at some of the new features in Sapphire 2020. Great job as always. I am gonna talk about new color management in Sapphire 2020. Sapphire 2020 features open color IO support, which, if you guys are not familiar with, Open Color IO is an open standard, an open source standard for color management, created by our friends and customers at Sony Picture Imageworks. It is a way for you to correctly manage your color pipeline if this is a concern. So if you're doing VFX and you want to make sure that your actually color pipeline is correct, the problem is, you may be working in Nuke, or you may be working in an application that actually has, no color management in it. Either way, if you added a third-party plugin like Sapphire, we would break that pipeline if it was managed. So you can imagine this is a source of kind of frustration for a lot of users. They would create a whole VFX pipeline and manage colors at every single point, and then they would jump into the LensFlare designer like Ben showed, and just break everything because we were not featuring any sort of color management. So this has been a top request for many years. As long as I've been associated with Sapphire, I've been getting kind of aggressively pleading customers for some sort of color management. So we're happy to add OCIO into Sapphire 2020. Easily a no-brainer in terms of kind of which way to go. OCIO is used by many studios and many applications already. So let's talk about really like how this ripples into Sapphire. OCIO is supported for all host applications. So obviously this is really relevant in the Nuke world, in VFX, but it also can bring OCIO support to After Effects, to Resolve, to Avid, even to applications like Mystica and Baselight. So very exciting, and I'll kind of talk you through how you can do that with the new OCIO transform effect. What basically happens is Sapphire 2020 pre-installs a default OCIO library with basically a bunch of custom LUTs, the exact same ones you'll find that are pre-installed with the OCIO library inside of Nuke. So pretty much the most popular LUTs out there, things for ACES and sRGB and linear and all kind of a whole bunch of red and Alexa LUTs. But if you want to install your own custom library, if you're a facility, you know, and you have your own custom color management profile per show, you can definitely install your own custom library as well. That custom library, by the way, can be installed a couple different ways, but it can be set as a environment variable for your computer. So it can be set at basically like a facility level, and it can be also set at an individual workstation level, and it can be set at an individual application level as well. There is a integrated OCIO panel inside of the preset browser, Flare Designer, and the effect builder. So when you're inside our preset browser, you can make sure that you are viewing those presets and viewing the correct colors also when you're working in the Flare Designer and when you're in the effect builder. How does this work? Let's just show you a couple ways. So now I'm going to grab Sapphire LensFlare here. And if I jump in to the Flare Designer, as Ben kind of hinted at earlier, there is a little color management workspace. So you can control, you know, kind of the viewer. So you can, if you're outputting to a broadcast monitor, you can control basically the output of the Flare Designer, and you can control the input of the image we're adding in. So you can kind of control, you know, after the flare has been added, and you can control kind of what the image coming in looks like. So we have, you know, viewer, you can say like, okay, if my, you know, basically my image is linear at its core, and sorry, that would be the viewer, you know, so I want to view a linear output, but my image maybe is from a red log or sRGB natively as well. And you can be sure now that everything you're seeing output to your monitor is correct, right? So that's one way we can manage colors within Sapphire. And this is the same workflow. You'll find the builder has this and the preset browser has this as well. If I just jump into Open Lens, you'll see here it remembered my correct settings, that my viewer wants to be in linear and my image wants to be in sRGB. And this is within all effects as well. And we also have a new Sapphire effect called S OCIO Transform. And that is just an effect that you can load up within any stack. And you can actually kind of control and transform the colors of your composite in an application that doesn't support OCIO natively. Like this really, you wouldn't need to do this in Nuke, but you know, in After Effects, if you wanted to use an OCIO workflow, here I just have nothing going on because I'm saying it's sRGB and I want to convert it to sRGB. But you can say basically, hey, maybe my image is linear, and then I want to look at what it looks like in sRGB, or look what it looks like in slog as well, or go the other. Maybe I'm sRGB natively, and then I want to see what my linear output would look like. So there is a ton of information on boriseffects.com in the FAQ. If you guys just go to support FAQ and then hit Open Color IO FAQ here, you have a nice little kind of primer as to how to do things like setting environment variables. This is something I learned about recently. You can set these within Windows, Mac, or Linux, so you can make sure that your default library is basically set. So an artist sits down at a workstation and he has access to all custom LUTs. You can also do this. If I jump back into After Effects, there is a file called sconfig, right? And this is like kind of the dark black magic side of Sapphire, but sconfig.txt is a config file that is inside in applications, in GenArts folder. You'll find sconfig in the docs. This information is all in the FAQ as well. And this file controls a lot of fun stuff within Sapphire. Definitely do not mess with this file if you are, not really comfortable or not, have an IT mind, because you can screw Sapphire up very quickly in here. But you can do things in here like turn GPU processing off and a bunch of other fun stuff. So we've added in an OCIO little note in here, where is it? Okay, right here. So this is where you can put your OCIO custom library in any sort of location. So you can have it stored on a network, and this is where you would enter it. You just basically would enter in your custom path, and then you can save this file, and when Sapphire loads up, this is how it'll look for that custom OCIO library. So always like to point out too, by the way, that if anyone wants to make a custom Sapphire plugin, there actually are instructions on how to do that in the sconfig file. And you can be one of the 3 people in the history of Sapphire that have ever created a custom plugin, but good to know that's in there. So like I said, this stuff is all on inside the FAQ on borisfx.com. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be answering them as well. And I think Jessie is going to have her last Oprah moment of the year here and give away some fun prizes to everybody.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so here we are with all the VFX prizes. Congratulations to Andre Taylor, who has won the 3-month Creative Cloud subscription. Congratulations to Delmar Penley, who has won the 1-year Boris FX bundle. Congratulations to Emily Zai, who has won the 1-year Sapphire subscription. Congratulations to Levi Betancourt, who has won the 1-year Continuum subscription. And finally, congratulations to Tamara Barbosa, who has won the 1-year Mocha Pro subscription. I will be sending you all emails with your licenses soon. And I think, Brian, if you have anything else, is that it?
I think that's it. Thanks so much for attending. Thanks so much for attending all our webinars all year. Like Jesse said, this is the last of the year for us, but we'll be back in January with a nice silhouette presentation. So that'll be a fun one as well.
All right, thanks everyone. Enjoy the holidays. Bye.